All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Just needed to preface this as I always do because, as usual, plans have changed for the video. So, in my last video, I said this would be a kind of playthrough slash experience of leveling up the blaster, but I think I'm gonna broaden it a little bit and make it about what to expect in Maplestory if you were to get in right now, how the burning event works, and my kind of thoughts and experience with that. So hopefully that's a little bit more relevant to people who might want to actually get into the game so that they know what to expect and where to go. So with that, let's get into it. Okay, so while the footage of me leveling up and getting my job and skills and all that is playing in the background, I want to say that at any point in time, if you start playing MapleStory, getting your first job, if it requires you to get to level 10, will be very simple. You'll get it done in like 15 minutes or so. The reason I say if is because some jobs start at level 1. So my class, the Blaster, is part of Resistance. As you'll have just seen, I talked to the Blaster to get that job, but there's a Battle Mage, Wild Hunter, and Mechanic as well. I picked Blaster because I wanted I like high action classes, and my favorite class previously was the Buccaneer or Pirate. This was a long time ago before it got like reworked. But back then you were obviously like short range, but you had all the skills to survive, through iframes and through damage and through different forms that you were given. So it was really cool, and I thought Blaster would kind of let me experience what I've always wanted, and in some ways it did, but I'll get more into that later on. But my point of saying that again is that getting to level 10 is not that hard at all. Now, as you can see on the screen, if you joined before July 21st, the burning event will be active. So between levels 10 and 200, you'll get an extra 2 levels per level. So getting to level 30 will be very easy. Getting to level 30 outside of this is still easy, it'll just take a little bit longer. But again, they have added, little quests that make it a little bit easier. There's like small dungeons, so it'll be very manageable as long as you put in just a little bit of effort. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is what comes after level 30, which is naturally level 31. More than that, it's 60, which will be your third job advancement, and level 100, which will be your fourth job advancement. Now, the reason why I mention that is because, like in any game, there's a tier list in this game. There will be jobs that are, you know, mostly subjective, but some objectivity to it about classes being more fun to play and classes that are more useful and classes that do more damage. Now, fun to play has some subjectivity to it, but there's some objectivity in terms of you know, skills and usefulness and abilities and damage output. Usefulness, now this is kind of related to like the link skills, so I don't even know too much about it, not being, that invested in the game these days. But basically, when you level up a class, you every class has a certain skill that you can unlock for like all your characters. So like on one account, let's say you have 10 characters, you have like a crossbowman, like a sniper, that's gonna give you like crit chance on all your characters. You have like another character that'll give you maybe like some damage or some health, things like that. So when you're looking, if you're looking online about classes to level up, they will mention these points as valid points. But again, that'll be if you're more invested and more in it for the long run. What I would say to consider, especially if you're not making a character during a burning event where you get the extra 2 levels, is look at the second and third job skills and see if people think that those are fun slash good damage output skills and jobs. I say that because some jobs may have stronger earlier skills, but their fourth or fifth job skills are not as impressive. Where other classes it might be the other way around. Like for example, and I'll probably mention this a lot in this video, is the Buccaneer, the Pirate, the Fighting Brawler class. Is that they say in the fifth job it comes together with like some really strong abilities, and that's why they mention doing a burning character for like the blaster, the one I did, because it has a lot of like combo intensive abilities, so you have to like spam your abilities a lot, so it's just easier to get it done with. Or like a Buccaneer, because earlier on the class skills and abilities don't make that much sense until you unlock all of them in the fourth and fifth job. So just an example. So to kind of wrap up this point, I would say try to find a class that has a pretty decent second and third job, maybe fourth job if you're interested in that. I think a lot of like second job, like around after level 30, they won't be too impressive. Blaster wasn't too impressive, but I think when you get Blaster to 60 and you unlock that third job skills, I think those come together and make the class pretty fun because you already have the mobility from before, but now you get, mobility skills, damage skills, mobbing skills, and it all comes together pretty well. So overall, I think the Blaster in this case would be a decent class to play up until level 100, and I say pick classes that are fun to play up until this point because you don't want to pick a class that blooms very late and then you don't enjoy it. So I think if you're unsure if you'll like the game, pick something that has early blooming, fun skills. I think Blaster isn't a bad option based off of my experience, although again it was burning so I went through it pretty fast, but overall I'd say it's not a bad option. But I'll get into my overall recommendations a little later into the video. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about is why I've been mentioning this level 100 cutoff. I think getting to like level 100 or level 140-ish, which is when you get your hyper skills, is kind of the casual point, if you will, right? You can play casual up to that point without getting too invested in the game, but when you get to like 150 onwards and you start getting towards the end of the game, you need to do like bosses and worry about getting your gear up to the right level so that you can level up efficiently and fight these high level bosses. And this is how MMOs work, right? They give you something to do because when you're getting to those later levels and you need that higher damage for mobs and for bosses, there's a few ways to get it. With mesos, you can add, extra lines of stats for your items or re-roll them to get better stats and increase the overall, basically, potential and rarity of the item. You can also create new characters for link skills, right? These are the skills that you'll get passively for having different characters and jobs on that account. So, increase crit, increase damage to bosses, increase defenses, things like that. So they've made it a lot easier to get to level 200. It's not something that is unexpected or unheard of anymore. The point is to get to 200 for the fifth job and to do some of the end game bosses. But just keep in mind that at that level, a lot of people do have, the link skills from extra characters. They've put in the time to re-roll their weapons and armor to be, very high stat, high percentage items. So I've talked about the different leveling phases of the game, but I think ultimately the one decision that'll make the biggest impact on your experience is whether you pick to play in the reboot server or non-reboot server. A quick explanation if you're not sure what those are. Originally the game was non-reboot, obviously, or not obviously, but as the game kind of progressed and they released new items and new ways to modify those items, it slowly turned into a sort of pay-to-win format where if you paid the like real money to get Nexon cash, you would be able to get your items to the highest and most perfectly rolled items and equips, which would boost your damage a lot, which would give you the biggest advantage. There's no PvP, so there's no advantage in that way, so it wasn't game breaking in that sense, but it would still kind of impact the people who were like me and didn't have tons of money or time to get the best equips. So then reboot server came out, and in reboot server there's no trading, so that kind of limits the economy of the game and the system. And at the same time they increase the like money that's dropped from like normal monsters, and it also increases. So now that I've talked a little bit about the leveling and the leveling phases of the game, I think the one decision that'll have the biggest impact on your experience playing the game is if you decide to play in a reboot server or non-reboot server. If you're not sure what that is, a quick explanation would be that originally in the base game, non-reboot, they started releasing ways to modify and add bonus stats to your equips, like your armor and your weapons, and eventually it got to a point where you could use Nexon cash, which you would get with real money, to get perfectly rolled items and re-roll it without risking your item breaking. So that kind of gave people who paid money a huge advantage over people like me who didn't have tons of time or money to pour into the game. So Reboot server came out, and what that did was is First of all, it disabled trading, so that way it didn't break the market of the game. And secondly, what it did was it increased drop rates and the drop amount from monsters. So you got more money per kill from monsters, but the drop chance for equips like items and armor was also increased. So before in non-reboot, it was pretty rare to get an equip, and if you got an equip, it was probably not for your class. But in reboot, the chance is decently high, so you'll naturally kind of get the equips you need mostly for the class that you're training for that appropriate level. So that kind of makes it easier to get the items you need as you're going along. So I think ultimately what it comes down to is, unless trading is a must for you, or hunting for special equips and then selling them is a must for you, I would probably say stick to the reboot server, just because of the buffs that you get. You'll see it on screen that you won't have to worry about saving up mesos to buy potions, which you'll need for training and for bossing. That you won't have to worry about trying to get equips, because some of them will drop as long as you're hunting monsters that are appropriate for your level. And that you can do all of the end game rolling stats and upgrading your gear all with the mesos without having to worry about spending real money. I think reboot is probably your best bet for playing. Alright, so let's say that, unlike my friends, you've decided that you'll give Maplestory a chance. Which job should you play then? Well, don't worry, I've done some research for you and I'll give you that list. Also, I need to stall a few more seconds in order to make everything sync properly in this video. Alright, so jobs that I think would be good for, I guess, newcomers or returning players. I think Pathfinder, Arc, Kaiser, Battle Mage, Phantom, Hayato, and Kinesis are probably going to be solid bets. Blaster's decent. Aaron I like because of the combo system. Most of the mages should be pretty good, with the one exception being the Evan. Only because of the skill mastery with like the books and stuff. I think it's a little bit confusing, but I mean, you do get a dragon, so like it's kind of worth it. Alright, so that just about concludes my unexpectedly lengthy video on Maplestory and my experience with leveling up and getting back into the game. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll get out the other video on the Blaster compared to the Buccaneer pretty soon. And with that, I hope you all enjoy your day. Thank you for watching.